Okay, so let's talk about our story and what I think it's about. I believe that our Torah portion has to do with authority, basically order and authority. And we are going to talk really about four stories in this parasha, in this Torah portion, and I'm going to try to do it on time. The first story is about a family that loses two sons. The second story is about values and laws. The third story is about two unfortunate goats. And the fourth story may be the most important one to outline our challenge in reading these stories. So this is the beginning. This is how our story begins, the first story. And this is about Jehovah speaking to Moses after the death of the two sons of Aaron. Now, if you've read previous portions, then you may know what it is talking to, what it is referring to. But if you haven't, then I think it's important to understand that Nadav and Avihu, and let's figure out first of all, who are they? Aaron and Elisheva had four sons. This is two very important tribes, the tribe of Levi and the tribe of Judah, where Moses and Aaron come from. And this is how they start building a legitimate hierarchy. Now, as I mentioned, Nadav and Avihu had four sons. Nadav and his brother Avihu were killed. They died to establish, as I see it, a clear hierarchy, which is compelled to do exactly what God says. God chooses mediators and they must obey him. And you will soon see that even when the matter is really unclear and maybe not even just, what we know is that God determines what is going to happen. So this is the confusion. The confusion starts from a situation where Nadav and Avihu actually saw God. Just a few chapters before that, we're told that some people went up to Mount Sinai. We don't know how high, but they went up on Mount Sinai. Nadav and Avihu were amongst the people, including 70 elders of Israel. And they saw the God of Israel. And there's like this romantic story of this paved walk of sapphire stone, and everything was very, very clear. And not only did they see God, but they had a picnic. They sat down, they ate, and they drank amongst God. So I guess they felt pretty confident in that time that, life is good and they're close to God, and Aaron is now going to sacrifice to God according to what God asks him, and that's what they are going to do as well. And Nadav and Avihu, the sons of Aaron, took each of them a censer. I think that's how you pronounce it in English. And you can see some at the bottom of this slide found in the area of Israel. And there came forth a fire before Jehovah and devoured them, and they died before Jehovah. So think about the scene. The scene is like this. The two sons out of the four sons, the two sons that are going to be priests one day, are sacrificing to God some sort of incense. They're sacrificing to God. Suddenly bursts a fire from them, and it is called a strange fire. Nobody knows exactly what that means. And then he burns them. God burns them. No explanation whatsoever to the situation. And then you can see the horror in Aaron, because the way that he reacts is, and Aaron fell silent. Or in Hebrew, Vayidom Aharon, complete silence. I mean, what do you say when you see your two sons go up in flames? And what is the reason? What is the reason? What is actually happening here? So this confusion of the narrative is because the division of the chapters and the passages of the Bible are confusing, because stories often cross chapters and passages. We met Aaron's sons when they were ascending to the mountain with the 70 elders, as we just saw. In the scene, the purpose was to legitimize Aaron's priesthood. And they are the descendants of Aaron, so it makes sense that they are the next priests. And they weren't told not to sacrifice, but this is exactly the kind of authority that we are told this God is. You can't predict what he's going to do. You have to be very, very careful about everything that you do, because you don't know what he's going to do. So if you're confused, that's good. That's what this narrative is meant to do. It means to keep you confused and frightened of this God. I'm going to go back to the slides. And I'm going to take you to another confusing story, but I would say less confusing and more unsettling. And this is a story about hierarchy and women. I want to show you a few words in Hebrew. And this comes from an article by Professor Achrei Mot, who came to our conferences in the years past, and she teaches us at the IISAJ Tmura from time to time. And she looks at these terms in Hebrew and says, clear hierarchy is reflected in our Hebrew language. I'm sure that you can do some similarities in other languages as well. Basically, the word for female in Hebrew is nekeva, which derives from the word hole, or absence. Family, mishpacha, comes from the word shifcha, which is handmaid. A married woman, when she's married to her husband, to her Baal. She is be'ula. She is possessed by her husband, her owner. Betrothed, mekudeshet, means sets apart for a specific man, transferred to the realm of culture from nature through betrothal, acquisition, and relation to the sacred, which lies entirely in the male realm. Cast out, when you want to say somebody is cast out, humenude, comes from the word nida, which is the time when a woman who is cast out as impure during and following menstruation. Divorce comes from the word legaresh, to cast out, grusha, driven out by her husband, who is her master and owner. How is all of this connected to our Torah portion? Well, the second story in our Torah portion has to do with many laws, which we're not going to read, but I'm just going to show you how many of them are there. Look at this. There are about 24 passages here of laws of who a man cannot sleep with. Okay, so if we would have time and you would have gone through this, each one of them, I believe that at some point you would ask, what about the daughter of this man? Well, it doesn't say that you cannot sleep with a daughter, but it does say how to form a social order. Let's put this troubling question on the side for a minute and see that it certainly does have to do with the social order. God is a male. Although there must have been other approaches because he has the name that means many. But one God, Yahweh, talking about archaeology, there are findings that people thought that he also had a wife, but he is a male. He identifies the struggle of control and authority, but also, and this we must realize, there is an aspiration to develop a culture based on tribes consisting of multi-generational families with the memory of a shared historical past and hope for a better future that mainly depends on them. So besides this hierarchy and brutality of God, there is also this construction of a new society. There is a trend to protect the possibility of the existence of the family as the essential basic cell in human society. This reason is not based on the view that denies the value of sex in human life, or on a view that sees sexual activity as contradictory to other values. The laws of celibacy, therefore, shape a healthy and functioning family, so much so that some anthropologists, as you I'm sure know, consider them the cornerstone of human culture. But the Jewish story, as it is expressed in the Hebrew language, and it is expressed in these troubling paragraphs, show maybe a different story, or I would say some of it is different. Now we're going to the third story. This story is a story about two goats. And this is a story that tells us that we have to have a way out if we've sinned. Because now we've seen that you can sin against God, you can sin against members of your family, but really sinning against them is sinning against God. So what do you do if you sin? And then comes this story. And this story is a story of coming together, the people of Israel, one day a year, one man representing them, in one moment before one God. Okay, and this had to be very legitimate. Everything has to be legitimate. The day, the time during the day, the person, and what happens before God. And what happens before God basically is that this priest takes two goats and he sacrifices one, and the other one kicks off the mountain and into the desert. And basically, they are the keepers of the sin. And this is really the term that we use when we say scapegoats. So in other words, the third story is really about atonement, but not a personal atonement. This has to do with a atonement of a people coming together. The scapegoat, in its religious and ritualistic sense, has the role of establishing order and unity in the face of maybe chaos and uncertainty. We do not lack biblical stories of a capricious God, unpredictable and therefore, as we mentioned, frightening. This ritual offers us as a people a way out. We, as one big family, are responsible for each other, not for any altruistic reasons, but to be in peace with a frightening God. Singling out, as I mentioned, one day a year, one moment in that day, one ritual performed by one man chosen by God, who, as we saw before, is considered legitimate. We believe. So how do we read the story? And I think that this is the challenge that I would like to uh, bring before us today. Um, our meeting is happening during a time of ordaining our next leadership. So this is all about authority. This story doesn't leave room for anybody to be their own sovereign person, certainly not a legitimate legitimate leadership. I think that by turning around the whole, I would say, story and saying that we believe in values such as equality and responsible leadership, we're really transforming this story in a critical way. And I think that it doesn't mean that this story is irrelevant. I think the story is relevant for critical reading. And I think that the interest in these stories, some of them tragic, like the story of these two sons who were arbitrarily killed, tragedies have a strong place in our culture. It doesn't mean that we believe that, we should have another Oedipus, but it is part of our culture. Nadav and Avihu are part of the culture. The horrible laws of the way that women were degraded and strangers are part of our culture. And we have to face that. The fact we disagree with them is also part of our developing culture. I regretfully, I'm not in Michigan today with you because of a terrible war that is going on here. And unless our leadership steps up to admit blame and not use scapegoats, but actually admits blame, takes ownership of their blame, we have no future. I know Israel's national anthem is all about hope. And I believe that's also part of our characteristic as a people. We always have hope. But we don't have hope if we don't have humanistic leadership. In other words, I truly believe that our Jewish secular humanistic family has a very strong role in the disturbing reality that we live in the democratic world. Our democratic countries are always in danger of becoming non-democratic. Leadership that believes in sovereignty, equality, and continue to keep the values that we believe in order to critically read whatever our predecessors wrote and to lead our congregations and our movements to keep our values is what we need today.